My name is Edgar Keret, and the book I'll talk about today is called The 7 Good Years. It's a book that I wrote about the 7 years between the birth of my son and the death of my father. It's my first non-fiction book, which is kind of gets you in a spot. When you write fiction, nobody really knows anything about your life, but when you write about your life, they do. When you write fiction, you go out on an adventure because you kind of start writing a story, and at least me, I don't know what's going to happen and who the character really is. So you write a story, but at the same time, you're kind of reading a story that is being written. And when you write non-fiction, you know how it's going to end, you know what's going to happen. And I think that for me, it was a bit difficult in the beginning to get myself excited about something that had already happened. But I guess that when you start writing, you realize that what you choose to tell, what you emphasize on, what you totally disregard, kind of makes the life that you've experienced a totally new thing. Right now, I don't travel as much as I used to, because I like to be with my family. But whenever they invite me to the Edinburgh Book Festival, I always come because it's always great fun to be here. It's a very friendly festival. You get to hang out with the other writers and drink beer. Because I don't drink whiskey. All the others drink whiskey, but I have the kiddie drinks, I've been to many festivals, and this is really one of the best. I think it will be interesting because both of us are kind of naturally fiction writers writing non-fiction, and both of us are people who are connected to more than one place. I'm son of immigrants, and Alain immigrated. So I think that that maybe in first glance we may look kind of very different, coming from different backgrounds, but I think that we also have a lot in common. I said in an event here once that there is something very ungrateful about the profession of translation. I said that translations are like ninjas. You only notice them when they're bad. Because when you read a book in translation and the translation is good, you attribute everything to the writer. You feel that there is no mediation. And it's only when something doesn't work that you become aware that there is another entity there. And I think that, to translate is basically to rewrite those stories again, because the languages operate in different ways. And you always your books can be only as good as their translators. And I know now that I've been translated to many countries, that the countries I have the biggest readership or the most loyal ones are the countries in which I have good translators.
My name is Alain Mabanckou. I'm a Congolese writer. I've written a latest book called The Lights of Pointe Noire, which is a book of my return to my native city, Pointe Noire, which is in Congo-Brazzaville. In this book, I speak about my mother, my father, my relatives, and the emotion you can have when you are going back home. And that book is like a twin with another book called Tomorrow I Will Be 20. And I think that reading The Light of Pointe Noire, we're going to show how, as an African, I'm trying to find my way living out of the continent. I think that in order to get to know a country, you'll have to know the people. So The Light of Pointe Noire is not a kind of card mailed to some tourists or something like that. The Light of Pointe Noire is a book about people, but about also all the smelling, all the feeling, all the way of living outside, and the myth and the beliefs of my country. To get to know the Congo-Brazzaville, you have to go to the sea called the Côte Sauvage, in which you're going to find kids roaming about, or you can go to the market. I try to put this kind of situation in that book so that the reader will feel like they're getting to my country without a passport. But in The Light of Pointe-Noire, it's a mix of fiction and autobiography. So it's at the same time the real people, the people who exist, but I try to put my writer touch in it in order to make people feel like they are going to that country. I can say that it can be a book about me, but it's a book about the people. I try to do myself so that the reader will think that it's the people who are telling the story in that book. Oh, I would recommend the writer Henri Lopez, who is one of our greatest writers in the Congo. He's been writing for 40 years. I read him at school. Henri Lopez, he lives in France and he wrote a lot of pieces. I don't know if it's translated into English. If it isn't, you have now the commitment of translating Henri Lopez in English. So far my translation is good because I kept the same translator, Helen Stevenson. So as a matter of fact, in English I have the same tone, the same voice, just the title is changed. So I'm very thankful to have that publisher. She is British, she's a writer, and she does a good job, and I don't want to split with her. This is my second time to come in Edinburgh. I think the last time was 5 years ago. The first impression is to see how people are very committed. They know what they want to do and they are there when the writers are speaking. That's very good to see this kind of one of the biggest festivals in the world. And the fact that all the greatest writers are invited here, or the emerging writers are invited here.
One of the reasons I went to the event was because both writers live other than their countries they were born in. And so I find that fascinating because when you don't live where you're born, your emotions are enhanced and your memories are enhanced. And so I think you can sometimes write with a much clearer view. So that was one reason. The other reason I wanted to go because Alain comes from Congo, and I'm fascinated, like many people are, about Congo. I've always wanted to go to Pointe-Noire myself. And so I thought buying his book and listening to him would give me an insight into what it's really like in case I don't get there. So from that point of view, I found it really, and I'm so much looking forward to reading this. And I hope he'll come back when the next one is published and translated into English too. Certainly, one wonderful session was a group of German writers that were actually talking about the subject of translation itself and how so many books are translated into German, but not necessarily the other way around. So yes, I do like to go to, say, not necessarily the big names, but the smaller writers that we might not know about in this country, but in their own country they're actually, important and have a lot to say. So those are under discussion groups too, and especially if there are ever African writers, I will always go, so I'm interested in African writing. Well, I mean, to me it's a huge, I look forward to it from year to year, and I go to a lot of things, and somehow in the Fringe you go to all sorts of different theatre and dance, but the events that you go to in the book festival, they will give you memories that you'll actually remember all winter, and then you look forward too. Like this year you've got Anne Enright coming, and she's my favourite writer of the moment. 2 years ago, Joyce Carol Oates. So hugely important to people that really, really love, those authors, to be able to see them, even if you don't ask a question, because sometimes somebody like Joyce Carol Oates or Margaret Atwood can be quite intimidating, so you're scared to ask a question. But yes, there have been so many amazing memories and writers that are no longer with us, and you think, I've read their books, but I've also heard them speak. So you carry those with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I'm a historian of Africa, so I originally came because I know Alain Mabancko's work, and it was really interesting to hear him talk about the experience of being an African writer but writing in France, and particularly writing in French with an African accent, with a Congolese accent. Yeah, that was what for me was really interesting. Yeah, so I'd read Demain j'aurai 20 ans, but I hadn't read the new book, which I have just bought. I loved hearing him talk, and we've bought the book, so looking forward to reading that when we get home. And I guess that's a good thing about bringing them both together, because you come for one author and then you end up finding a new author that you wouldn't have heard of otherwise. I like the idea that he started with trading stories rather than trading money and goods. It's interesting to think about what you gain and lose by reading something in translation. So Alain Mabanckou we've read in French, but Edgar Keret's work we're going to read in translation. So to think a little bit about how the experience of reading something in translation versus the experience of reading the original will be interesting as we read those, I guess. It's been lovely, and I think it's grown in scale since I was last here. It's probably fair to say, but for the better, so we'll be definitely coming back. Yeah, I mean, this one really jumped out at me because it was an African event. So when I saw it being advertised on Twitter, I went off and bought tickets fairly quickly. So yeah, I will look out for more African writers in the future.